False Entitlement. Part 5 in a series describing God's providence earlier in the career of a college professor. In August, after my first year as assistant professor, I got a disturbing call from the provost. Days earlier, I'd been appointed program coordinator for a small group of education faculty. Now she wanted me to conduct an emergency search for a full-time instructor to start on the first day of the fall term. It felt rushed. Why throw this in my lap days after my new appointment? I had no idea where to start. When she explained the full scope of the plan, I realized I'd been put in an incredibly awkward position. Half-time appointments for two of my colleagues would be canceled. Both had been teaching at the college longer than me. Now they would have to compete for that one full-time position, and I was in charge of making it happen. There had to be something behind this, something it wasn't my business to know. I suspected it had to do with one of those half-time colleagues whom I'll call Jennifer. Jennifer had applied for the tenure-track job I was hired for. She wasn't pleased to have been turned down, especially when she learned she'd have to move out of her office to make room for me. When I arrived on campus, I found her books and papers strewn everywhere. It took several days for her to gather everything up and move into the smaller office she now shared with Jean, the other half-time instructor. Had Jennifer rubbed others the wrong way, and did that have something to do with the provost's decision? Since the office incident, she'd been civil to me, but only just. Our truce could easily end when she found out I was leading this search and her job was at risk. This could get ugly. I wavered between gratitude for the provost's confidence in putting me in charge and suspicion that she was setting me up for catastrophe. Daily I prayed the process would be peaceful and that the Lord would guide it to a fair outcome. My first step was to put together a small search committee, me and two others. The only other faculty member in the program available that summer was my senior colleague Harold. Harold chaired the search that had brought me to campus and was my mentor during the past year. He had a history with both part-time instructors. He had known Jean since his daughter was in Jean's 6th grade class. After Jean retired, he recruited him as a part-time instructor. Jennifer, by contrast, had been placed in the program when her husband was hired to teach elsewhere on campus. I didn't know for sure that Harold had opposed her appointment, but I suspected as much. In the past year, he'd never spoken of her or to her in my presence. For Harold, a clear sign of disapproval. Still, I couldn't not ask him to be on the search committee. The best I could do was pick a third person who had no history with either candidate. Searches in higher education are tightly regulated. You risk a lawsuit if you fail to hire a qualified candidate from a protected class, a woman, a non-white person, a homosexual, a person with a disability, etc. To avoid trouble, you have to be very careful how you describe the positions you're hiring for, especially required and preferred qualifications. We kept these simple. 3 required qualifications, a master's degree in education or a related field, experience teaching in K-12 schools, and excellent oral and written communication skills. 2 preferred qualifications, experience teaching in higher education, and a doctorate. Because of the short time frame, we advertised the position for only a week, and I was surprised that we got 3 applications. Jennifer, Jean, and Sonia, a local kindergarten teacher none of us had met before. Their resumes were very revealing. Only one had a doctorate, Jennifer, but it was in public health, not education. Before college teaching, she'd worked at various agencies as a health educator. Sonia and Jean, by contrast, had teaching licenses, master's degrees in education, and decades of experience teaching in public schools. Jean and Jennifer had both taught several years in the college. Sonia hadn't. Normally, a search committee interviews 2 or 3 top candidates. Because of the time pressure, the other committee members wanted to skip that step. Jean was a known quantity, liked by students, and obviously the best qualified. That, I knew, would be a disaster. Jennifer could argue that she had 2 preferred qualifications, a doctorate and college teaching experience. Jean had only 1. True, the degree wasn't in education, but she would argue public health was a related field. And true, she hadn't been a full-time K-12 teacher, but as a public health educator she had made presentations in elementary and high schools. Why couldn't that count as K-12 teaching experience? At minimum, we had to interview Jean and Jennifer, hear the case they made for themselves, and take that into account in our final decision. But what about Sonia? She met the minimum qualifications. Even without the preferred qualifications, she might turn out to be an appealing candidate. With her in the mix, it wouldn't be a head-to-head contest between the other two. I persuaded my fellow committee members that we should interview all three. I'd prayed for a peaceful process. The interview contributed to that. All three of the applicants had their say. Gene was enthusiastic. In response to our questions, he overflowed with anecdotes from his 30 years' experience as a classroom teacher and explained how he shared these with students to help them understand their future role. Jennifer, by contrast, came off as defensive. She kept emphasizing that students liked her. She helped with their assignments. She clarified instructions. She explained the meanings of unfamiliar terms based on definitions in the textbook. But her limited understanding of classrooms and teachers' roles was painfully evident. As an instructor, she wasn't inept, but she had only a superficial understanding of what she was supposed to be teaching. The real surprise was Sonia. At first she was nervous and tongue-tied, but after a few encouraging questions, she opened up about her passion for young people in classrooms. Kindergarten, she argued, was a microcosm of the community. To watch young children's development was a constant source of joy. She knew the hopes and fears of their parents better than she knew members of her own family. She hoped to have a chance to share these experiences with future teachers. The interviews gave a vivid picture of the strengths and weaknesses of the three candidates. There was no doubt about the final ranking. Jean first, Sonia second, Jennifer third. This was the fair outcome I had prayed for. I called the candidates to let them know the results. Jean was excited and grateful. Jennifer hung up on me, no surprise there. Sonia listened humbly as I explained how impressed we were by her enthusiasm and knowledge, but that she lacked a track record of successful college teaching. She asked what she could do to improve her chances if another position like this opened up. Part-time teaching, I wondered aloud. I had a section still open for fall. She accepted, and eventually became one of our most reliable part-time instructors. How relieved I was after those phone calls. The Lord had answered my prayer, a peaceful process and a fair outcome. The interview strategy had worked. Looking back now, 20 years later, I can see there was more to it than strategy. Through prayer, I was able to act in harmony with God's will. Having done that once made it easier to do so again in the future. But God wasn't done with me yet. Neither was Jennifer. A few weeks later, I got a call from the provost. Jennifer had filed a discrimination complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, claiming I'd hired a man with a master's over a better qualified woman with a doctorate. My heart sank. The search process and its outcome were just the opening act in this drama. The real problem was that Jennifer thought she was entitled to something she wasn't. Thinking back on the books strewn over the floor of my new office, I realized I should have seen this coming. This, I guess, must be what the provost had in mind when she directed me to conduct this search. My real charge wasn't finding the right person in time for the first day of classes. It was to protect the college from the wolf at the door, for the demands of someone with a false sense of entitlement. To answer a claim of discrimination, the college had to provide an affidavit rebutting the claim. That task fell to me with the help of outside counsel. I was amazed how difficult it was to convey all the particulars of this situation succinctly. The affidavit would be read by the judge, Jennifer, and her lawyer. I had to anticipate that the judge wouldn't fully understand the decision to hire Jean unless I explained each step of our reasoning. Undoubtedly, Jennifer and her lawyer would do everything they could think of to twist what I wrote to make it appear that she had been treated unfairly. Draft after draft I rewrote, carefully inking corrected language onto the pages the lawyer kept sending me, all the while praying to God that I was up to this task. As I labored over those pages, I discovered a new source of difficulty. To rebut Jennifer's claim, I had to quote from her resume and cover letter. They were full of errors. Spelling, grammar, punctuation, capitalization, even spacing. You name it, it was in there. It took intense concentration to transcribe all of them accurately and not give in to the impulse to correct them. It dawned on me that from a legal standpoint, Jennifer had a deficit more obvious and clear-cut than her lack of experience in schools and her superficial knowledge of what she was supposed to be teaching. The job she'd applied for required excellent skills in written communication. The resume and cover letter were some of the sloppiest writing I'd ever seen. Back went my deposition to the lawyer, complete with my new argument. To my relief, I never heard back from her, or from the court, or from Jennifer. As anyone who's been through this process knows, there's nothing like the sweet sound of silence when someone tries to take advantage of those you're charged with protecting and fails. With the Lord's help, with insights that could only have come from the Holy Spirit, and with hours of labor over an issue I thought had already been laid to rest, I had finally completed the task assigned to me by the Provost. The right person was found for the first day of class, and the demons of false entitlement had fled from our door. There have, of course, been other Sonias, Jeans, and Jennifers. So many hirings and firings and lawsuits, I get exhausted trying to remember them all. In my 20 years as academic leader, I've never been at a loss for what to pray about. I've had more opportunities than I can count to practice what I learned from the Lord when I kept the wolf of false entitlement from the door of that first college I worked at so many years ago.